Hi, this is Atticus. You might know my mom, Heather, from Shine.fm. This is the Shine.fm Momcast. Take it away.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Shine.fm Momcast. I am Heather Erb, and I am again joined by my friend Jennifer, who has been a foster parent, who is an adoptive parent, and she also has a master's degree in give me the term, family?
Sure, family life educator.
Family life educator. I was going to say family studies, and I knew that wasn't right. There's one thing that you and I got talking about before we started with the podcast, and that's why we created another one, was that there are a lot of things that are said within the church walls even to foster and adoptive parents that coming from I'm going to take their place, or their spot, comes from ignorance.
Sure.
Comes from a place of just wanting to connect. And unfortunately, sometimes we say things that are really hurtful and, to be honest, out of line. And you're just trying to make conversation. Like, right. I look at myself as a younger version of me, not knowing some of the things that I know because I'm friends with you, but like knowing that I've said things to people that could have been construed as really hurtful or totally inappropriate.
Yeah.
Like, instead of just playing with the child that you see, you question all kinds of things, but in the way of making conversation. Yeah. So let's talk about a couple experiences that you've had, just to lay those out there so that these are real things that have happened. But also let's talk about what are some things that we can say or questions we can ask to adoptive and foster parents that help us to connect, that help us with the conversation.
Right. Fantastic. Well, yeah, I have a ton of stories, and I'll just pick two.
Okay.
Just two. One from in the community that happened with me, and one that happened in the church, which, again, we want the church to be a safe place for all people, right? Well, out in the community one day, my little adoptee and I, she was about 2 at the time. She was in the shopping cart. I was in the Meijer cashier's lane, and I'm putting all the vegetables on the conveyor belt, and the woman behind me is looking at my daughter and looking back at me, and she starts just saying, hey, you've got crazy curly red hair, and she has, and then she described my daughter's hair.
Very different from yours.
Very different from mine. And then she went down the list. Everything that was different about the two of us, she was saying, well, her eyes are this and your eyes are that. And I'm putting the head of lettuce on the conveyor belt thinking, oh my gosh, like at one point I thought,
going here, right?
I know, I was like, I feel like you're like checking me out. Are we dating, lady? I mean, like, I feel like this is too close for comfort. So, side note to foster and adoptive parents, you have an amazing opportunity and role to be a kind and gracious teacher to the community around you. I so easily could have taken the road of offense with this and thought, oh, another ignorant person, who doesn't understand that people's families don't come in the same, shape and color all the time. Hold back and don't get offended, but ask the Lord to help you. How can you respond? So I'm putting the tomatoes on the conveyor belt now, and I'm like, Lord, how do I respond to this? Because she has not stopped. I'm praying.
She's on.
I'm loading the conveyor belt. She is still.
She's all in.
Her toes are tiny, and you have big feet. I mean, she just kept going on, and I was like, Lord, how can I honor this woman and give her an answer? Not just so she'll stop talking, but how can I do this in a way that is honoring to her? And he immediately gave me a picture in my head of me at the age of 4 and my sister at the age of 2. And my sister had like this really wispy, light blonde, almost angel hair type of hair. I was like, oh yeah, she looks like my sister. So I turned to the lady, I said, she looks a lot like my sister.
Right.
And she was like, oh, I have a niece's cousin's auntie like that in our family. And I just realized, oh, this woman is not necessarily nosy, although maybe no filter, but, she was just chatty Cathy. And she was just trying to make that conversation.
Right.
And she was noticing things, and she didn't think how inappropriate or how intrusive it might feel to me.
For sure.
With that, I didn't lie.
Right.
I didn't snub her. I wasn't offensive to her. And I also didn't give her any confidential information.
Well, and that's what
family.
I wanted to ask you. I think there's this idea that we who aren't in your shoes think that maybe you want to share your story with us. No. You don't, right?
Not in the wrong places.
No, right, not at the grocery store.
Not
but
at
like,
the grocery store.
I think that like,
and not in front of my children.
Right. And so that's the other thing is we may be just trying to make conversation.
Right.
It's not an appropriate time to be asking all those questions or making comparisons. You know,
Right,
I mean,
no,
like
no.
I am 5'3" and I have a son who's 6'4".
Yeah.
Okay, like people might go, he don't look anything like you.
Right.
He looks like his dad, you know what I
Right,
mean? But
right.
like, so I think that we need to be more mindful of the fact that, like you said, families don't come in the way that we think they should.
Right.
And we don't understand that those things can be really hurtful. And
Or
you
awkward.
don't, right, and you don't want to say that, you don't, oh no, she's blah, blah, blah. No.
Right, no.
No, you don't want to do that in the grocery store. You don't want to do that at church.
No. No, so good points, Heather. And here's another example. Here's one from what happened at church one day. We were friends with a lot of foster and adoptive people in our community. One weekend we had their 2 African-American adoptees hanging out with us, and there was a church event. So we're like, hey, we'll take them to church and go to lunch afterwards. And we were leaving the church building, and so we've got 3 Caucasian kids that look not like us and some like us, and
Right.
we have these 2 siblings who are from a completely different culture. This Caucasian woman with her Caucasian family sitting in a pew says to me, "Are all those really your children?"
What?
Yeah. And the kids are like all around me, kids. We have 7 of them at that, 5 or 7.
Right.
I was serious. I'm like, how am I supposed to respond to that? And what I wanted to say, I'm just being real. I wanted to say, is that your real blonde?
Oh no.
I could see her roots. They were like 2 inches deep. I know. Well, I thought it. I'm just being real, Heather. I really wanted to come back with this sharp, like, how is this your business? And how do you expect me to answer you in
Right.
front of all these beautiful children that God loves? Like,
Right.
aren't they all real children? Like, so my hackles got up. My protective mama bear started coming out. And then I was like, oh, but Jesus is Lord.
I'm in his building.
I know, I'm in his house, right? So I can't be all snarky, fleshy girl. I honestly, I think I said, we just have some that are hanging out with us today. And I didn't say these 2 that are,
Right.
African American are the ones hanging out.
No.
I just said, we have a few hanging out with us today. And then I just kept, okay, kids, let's get to the car.
You were like, we're not going to go
get
any
me
further.
outta here.
Yeah.
I grieved for those 2 kiddos because they are being raised by Caucasian adoptive parents who are amazing. They are awesome. They are aware. They are believers, and they know what their kids of another ethnicity need to have to grow up in, the world we live in America right now.
right.
So, but I grieved for the kids because I thought, oh, they heard that. They don't need to be singled out, and not in God's house.
No, right.
We are all God's children, the end.
Right.
So that conversation didn't need to happen. Now, she was probably curious too, and maybe she didn't have a filter. And it's not up to me to teach her that. I just had that one moment, and we got out of there.
Right.
But so there are some things that people shouldn't say. So if you're naturally curious, and you
Which
you
I
think,
am. I'm going to be honest.
sure.
I am. I mean, and it's more about just connecting with people
Yeah.
and having a conversation.
Sure.
But there are definitely things, like I told you off, like if I was the woman behind you with your daughter, now at a 48-year-old, a little bit more educated on this issue because of you, I would just play with her. I would be peekaboo, or I wouldn't ask questions because,
Right,
like you
right.
said, I now understand that families don't look like my family. Like all families don't look like my family.
Right,
So, what
right.
are some other things that people have said, and then will you talk about some things that we can say, or that
Right.
questions we can ask that are
Yeah.
appropriate in those moments?
Perfect. Well, first, something to know is that adopted children are not, or children who have been adopted are not still in foster care.
Right.
Okay, so some people actually don't know that. So they think that children, or they think that children who are in foster care in your foster home are going to be adopted by you. And that is not the state's intention or plan. Their plan is to reunify kids in care back with their biological family of origin, to keep and support a family, an intact family.
Okay.
When that doesn't happen, the children, the rights are terminated on the parents, and the children become adoptable.
Right.
And so with that, I just wanted to start with a few things, a few phrases that we would love to have other people know are maybe outdated or not not as honoring.
Right.
Because it's not just the child that's involved, but we'll start with this one. Instead of saying, "Are you the real mom?"
Okay.
You know, I am really momming right now.
Right.
I am, and these children they exist. They are real. They are the real kids.
Right.
They are not my biological children, and they have a birth mom. So I'm not their birth parent. I'm their adoptive parent.
Right.
And people shouldn't be shy of that. Hollywood gets it all wrong. I think there's a superhero show we like to watch, and in the beginning, the narrator actually uses the wrong term there too. So somebody didn't do their research. But we want to honor the birth parents because they chose life.
Right.
Right? They chose life.
Right.
They could have chosen something else, but they chose to give birth,
Right.
and it didn't work out that the children would be safe with them. So there was an adoption plan that came up.
Okay.
And speaking of that, we want to say the child was placed for adoption. There
Okay.
was an adoption plan that the birth parents chose. When we say things like they were put up for adoption, it actually, that phrase goes back to slavery days where slaves were put up on a block in the town square
Okay.
for auction.
Okay.
And there's a connotation that a person is a piece of property. And in orphan trains, in where orphanage started in America, children were literally put up on top of the boxcar of the train, and farming families out west said, yeah, I'll take that 7-year-old. He can work my fields. So it wasn't to nurture and care and help the child develop.
Right.
It was child labor.
Right.
Instead of saying they gave up their child, we say they made an adoption plan, like I said a minute ago. We spoke about the biological children versus your own children. Are these your own children? Every child that is in my family, in my household right now, whether they are biological or have been adopted, they are my children.
Right.
Instead of saying he or she is adopted, adoption is a one-time event. It's not a person's identity.
Right.
I am a Caucasian 49-year-old female. That's who I am.
Right.
Those things identify me. I am not I was not adopted. I am not adopted. Right. So my children I don't refer to them as she is adopted, he is adopted. I say they were adopted. It was a one-time,
deal. Like
deal.
It happened,
It was a one-time
and
event,
and
that
they're
was
done.
it.
Yeah,
it's not who they are. It's part of their story, but it is not who they are as a human being. So instead of saying, where did you get him? Or where did you get her? You could say, where is he or she originally from? Especially if you notice that there's maybe an ethnic difference between the parents and the children. Where are they from?
Right.
That's a quick little list of helpful tips, I hope. Some questions that we have had asked, is this a meth baby? Is it a crack baby?
Oh.
Like, well, that is none of your business. And for people to know that that's not, let's be strength-based about how we approach people of all kinds.
Right.
Let's not zero in on maybe the worst case scenario for each person. And check yourself. Is it really your business?
Right.
It's not your business.
it's
You
not.
don't need to know that to pray for them.
No.
You don't. Foster parents are legally required to keep everything, confidential.
Right.
This is somebody else's family history. And it's a family in crisis right now.
Right.
If the children are in foster care, this family is still a family and they're in crisis. And the foster home is just a safe place to have the kids grow and thrive while biological mom and dad get some services and get some help.
Right.
And hopefully we reunite these families.
Right.
And what an amazing miracle that could be. And yes, adoption is miraculous too. Sometimes maybe we look at adoption in a glorious light more than we do, wow, this family was reunited and they're going to make it with support and love. Like all of us need support and love to make it, right?
We talked about the grocery store. We talked about like church. The thing that I would say, and I want to make sure that you feel like you would agree with this, but like let's say I'm in a small group or a life group with a family that has either fostered or is fostering or has adoptive. Would it be okay for me to say, after building a relationship, like not the first night I see them, and say, but would it be okay to say, would you at some point share your parenting journey with me?
Oh, yes, that's
Would that be
beautifully
okay?
said, Heather. That's
Okay.
And they might say we're not ready because
Right.
maybe they don't know if they can trust you and
Right.
your responses yet to know. Again, I want to say to the foster adoptive families that might be listening that if you want to have the support and community around you of people that are not fostering like you are or have not adopted like you have, you are going to have to graciously teach a few things to family and invite some of your church family into your world a little bit so they can kind of see what's going on in your dynamics and
Right.
the energy in your home, the needs
Right.
of the kids in your home, because they probably do want to engage in some way.
Right.
If they just don't know how to.
Right.
And so I think saying, hey, I would love to hear a little bit about your fostering journey or I love how you said parenting journey or your adoption story when you feel comfortable sharing it with me. And maybe you need to have a disclaimer there too, Heather, like you don't feel like you have to share to the whole group.
Right.
But I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee sometime or come over to your house and
Right.
I'll bring you a pizza, and we'll have the
Right.
kids eat the pizza while you tell me a little bit in the
Right.
other room.
Right.
And I would also just want to say, that situation that happened in the church with the blonde lady, don't ask those questions in front of the kids.
That's good.
You can ask some personal questions. Like it is very personal. And just feel it out and pray and ask God to give you some wisdom about how you approach things. But I love what you said. Can you share about
But
your
it has to be
journey?
safe. Like, that's the thing
Yeah.
that I would say, too, that, like you said, it can't, the first meeting, I'm not going to be like, oh, so I noticed that you have 2 kids that don't look like you. What's the story? No, that's not safe. You know what I mean? That's not safe. And so
No.
I think also us being sensitive, those of us that have, are not in your situation or don't have kids that are clearly, that don't look like us, that people
Right.
notice,
Right.
to not be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
whole, and again, I think when I think about interactions that I had with people at the grocery store when I was younger, it was out of my ignorance. And so
Sure.
that's what we don't like. We don't want to do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We want to be like sensitive to the fact that that family may be going through a lot
Right.
with that child in their care, whether it be foster or adoptive. So let's be sensitive to the fact that maybe they don't want to tell you their whole story in the
Right.
grocery store while they're putting
Right.
their tomatoes up on the, on the cart,
Yeah.
So
I think I said to you earlier that, man, when I was younger, I'm 49 now, but when I was younger, I really thought that I had so much wisdom, like the world should look like this and people should just do this and they just need to get their kid under control. And I had not gotten married, had my own kids yet. And I had a lot of judgment
Yeah.
toward everything. I grew up in the style of our house was, they should have, he should have. It was a very judgmental household. And so I grew up in that thinking. And until I was bathed with some situations that I was not prepared for, I didn't realize how much grace other people had to have for me.
Right.
And if I had offended somebody and they still kept me as their friend, I was like, wow. One day I kind of realized, oh my gosh, I said this to so-and-so, and do I need to go apologize to them? No. But can I do better? I mean, so maybe I need to go apologize to so-and-so.
If it was
but
bad.
I don't need to apologize to everybody. I will just ask Jesus to forgive me, help me learn better and do better as I go forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing that experience, because I do think that's really practical. And I love that we have, both sides. Like, I can see the side of just being curious and wanting to ask
Yeah.
questions and not understanding that might not be appropriate, and that you allowing us to understand some of the terms of adoptive parents and adoptive children and foster children, and being able to just be more sensitive in those situations to the parents and what they're experiencing. So thanks for sharing today.
Thanks for having me.